Hi, I'm Chad with Move Forward Guitar. This lesson is from our series, How to Memorize Guitar Notes. In this lesson, I'm going to give you a trick for breaking free from having to visualize the octave shapes as you're memorizing the guitar notes. First off, if you like all the diagrams from this series, including the diagrams from this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Memorize Guitar Notes. But I am working on it right now as I'm filming this lesson, so it might not be available as you're watching the lesson. But once it is available, a link will pop up on the screen that'll allow you to download it. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to download it when it is available. This is part 11 from our series, How to Memorize Guitar Notes. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So a lot of what I've been showing so far has been using octave shapes to visualize where all the notes are. For example, if you started with E, you would use your octave shapes to quickly find the rest of your E's. You would do that in order, and eventually, if you're on a note, for example, like way up here, you could reverse your octave shapes to try and find what your note is. And if, for example, if you know your sixth string really well, that'd be a way that you could visualize that this was an E as well, and so on. And that's a really good way to start. I think it's an important way to start for most people, but it's also important to eventually break free from this because it can kind of be a crutch and can kind of slow you down, because reversing your octave shapes to find what note you're on, for example, if you only know your sixth string really well and you have to reverse it all the way to your sixth string if you're starting on your second string, that can take some time to visualize. It's a good way to start, but like I said, eventually you want to break free from that. And in this lesson, I'm going to give you a trick to start breaking free from that. And you may not need this trick. You may find that using the octave shapes, you just naturally have broken free from it as you're playing and as you start learning scales and stuff. For example, I didn't really ever try to break free from it, and it just became natural to me to break free from it, not have to rely on them so much. But other people can get really stuck into visualizing patterns and shapes on the guitar, which can hinder you. You need to be able to just land on a note and automatically know. For example, if I landed right here, that's an A sharp or B flat. You need to be able to do that really quickly without having to visualize any octave shapes. So to start off, we're going to take off all the notes from the 12th fret up, because obviously those are just repeated from down here. So you don't need to think about those right now. And to make it really simple, we're just going to look at natural notes for now. Because like I've said multiple times, if you know where your natural notes are, it's really easy to find your sharps and flats. So the first thing I recommend you doing is memorizing your sixth string really well up to the 12th fret. Actually, it'll only be up to the 10th fret for now with your natural notes, because the 11th fret is a sharp or a flat. And you may have already done this. I'm hoping you have at this point, but if you haven't, just take the time. Your open sixth string is an E, so it just goes in alphabetical order to G and then starts back over at A. So it's E, F, G, A, B, C, D. It's really easy to memorize. If you just take the time, you could probably do it in one sitting and get pretty good at it. And if you just practice that a little bit each day, just so you don't forget, you'll have it memorized really quickly. And of course, E to F is a half step, B to C is a half step, everything else is a whole step when you're talking about natural notes. So that's the first step. It's really easy to do. Just take the time to do that if you haven't. And then from there, we're going to start memorizing the notes of all the strings in order. We're just going to take one note on the sixth string and then find it on the fifth string, then the fourth string, then the third string, then the second string, and then the first string, which is just the same as the sixth string. And this way you're not skipping strings, which octave shapes are skipping strings. So for example, if I went to here from my E, I'd have another E that's an octave higher. But instead of doing that, I want to find it on the fifth string first, so that I'm not visualizing this octave shape. I'm just identifying where these notes land on my fretboard. And like I said, this will really help you break free from having to visualize octave shapes. So if we just start with E on the sixth string, we'll start with the open E, and then our next one would land right here. So now we're looking at the fifth string now, since we started on the sixth string. So we'll find that one. It's easy. It's just the open sixth string. So then find where it lands on the fifth string, and that's right here, which is the 7th fret. And you can visualize it compared to this marker. There's a marker in the 7th fret, and that's what you're going to do. And you can stick with those two notes at first. Just hit your open E string, say the E note as you hit it so that you're really locking in that that's an E, and then find it on the next string quickly and visualize where it lands on your fretboard. And once you know where that one is really well, you go to the next string down towards the floor, which is the 4th string. It lands right here, which if you need to visualize is right before this fret marker. It's right after the 1st fret, and so on. You just visualize like little guideposts where they land on your fretboard, and just go through every string in order until you've really memorized where these are. And just start with one note. Just start with your E, which starts with the open 6th string, and go to the 5th string, 4th string, 3rd string, 2nd string, and then the 1st string is just the same as the 6th. And just really visualize where these land compared to your fret markers. And just do that over and over until all these E's are really easy for you to visualize quickly. And now you're not relying on octave shapes and having to go in order of the octave shapes and skipping strings. You're just going in order of the strings, and that's going to really help you break free from those octave shapes. Then once you can do the E's, do it with all the F's, and it'll be the exact same thing. Then go to G's, do the same thing, just start on a 6th string, find where they are compared to the fret markers, and just really visualize where these notes are landing on your fretboard. And just stick with one note until you're really good with it, even if that takes a month. You just do it a little bit each day, and eventually you're just going to automatically know, for example, oh, this is a G note right here. I just automatically know it's landing between these 2 fret markers on the 2nd string. You won't have to think backwards in octave shapes to get to this note to really visualize where it is. And the point's not to memorize these patterns, even though the patterns stay the same no matter what note you're on. They're just going to move to a different spot on the neck. The whole point of this is to break free from patterns and just visualize where these are actually landing on your fretboard. And this may be really hard at first, actually breaking free of visualizing octave shapes, but over time, like I said, you're just going to know where these notes actually are on your fretboard, and just stick with one note at a time until you really have it locked down. And then of course, that's everything below the 12th fret. Then you can just do everything above from the 12th fret on, and it'll just be the same thing. For example, if you start with E, it just depends how high your fretboard goes if you can reach this E, and it's just going to be the same thing. Just will be mimicking what happened down here. So that's a trick for breaking free from octave shapes. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson, where I'm going to show you how all the natural notes belong to a specific scale and all the sharps and flats belong to a specific scale, and how you can use those scales to memorize those notes and visualize where they land on your fretboard. And be sure to download the e-guide. All the diagrams are in there, and be sure to subscribe because we have at least one new lesson every day.